Hello, 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 and welcome to this week's episode of Fabrically Speaking Live. I'm your host, Claire Rowley, and this is the summer session of our 5th season of the show. I hope that you all are staying cool. It's very difficult to stay cool this week in Arizona, and I can't complain because I live in northern Arizona. And I know there are some of you living down in the Phoenix area. I'm also sending out my compassion and love for everyone who's been affected by the floods in Texas and New Mexico, and those who experienced it for North Carolina when those floods happened. I am excited to just kind of play with you today instead of having a really strict schedule or plan. I'm going to talk about couching. If you're familiar with couching, go ahead and hit the like button or tell me about it as I enter my chat. Welcome. See if it's working. Last week's Fabrically Speaking Live was, we had trouble because we were having thunderstorms, and then I decided that once I finally it took an hour to get my microphone to work, but I was able to do it. So be sure to check out the YouTube channel to see where I did an alteration for a 4th of July shirt for my friend Terry, and see what I did. Because I didn't take anything apart. I just kind of tweaked some things and was able to alter a top. Because sometimes we can just cheat on an alteration instead of having to dismantle. Hello, Wendy. I didn't give anyone notice. I just have been visiting with some dogs. I've been pet sitting for 4 dogs, and they're amazing, total sweethearts. But I'm not getting much sleep, and it's been so hot. I feel human today. Yay. I've been feeling like a dog the last few days. So this is a garment that one of my students made. She went through the Creativity Technical Guide and Workbook and created some of the techniques that are in here and incorporated into several different garments. I was very excited. I'm looking around here for anything that may have couching. One of the things I have is this right here. Wrong. See the couching on that? This is a makeup bag, or whatever kind of bag you want it to be. And you can see inside of here, I have this elastic that I've stitched in there as well, so that you can put things in there. There's a presser. And I've been feeling like making some bags lately. It's another bag that I made. This was done using free motion quilting. This one is lined and padded with batting. So there's some batting in between these 2 layers. On this one, this is just 2 fabrics that are the same, and I fused the 2 together, crossing the grains. And the reason I crossed the grain on that is because if you cross the grains and you fuse the fabrics together, there's no longer a bias. There's no longer a cross grain and with grain. It is just a fabric that cannot stretch, which is a wonderful way of doing samples for a book, or a way to learn all your decorative stitches on your sewing machine. As you can see on this, that I did utilize different decorative stitches to attach yarn. And I've got some fun yarn here to play with. This is another couching project. This is couching with the Sequins and Ribbon foot, sewing eyelash yarn. And then when I slide this over, you'll see there's some cording, like you see here. This is a rat tail cording that you can get at any of your craft and hobby stores. And then this is a sparkly yarn. So pearls and piping foot was used for the cording, sequins and ribbon foot for the furry, satin edge foot for appliquing with yarn. So yes, you can actually applique with couching. It would be super difficult to do that with a hoop, but with the Creative Feet, it's easy. Simple, simple. So inside of the Creative Feet Technical Guide and Workbook, you're going to not see the name couching, because couching is simply sewing something down on fabric. It's not just one thing. And with the Creative Feet, all three are couching feet. Instead of giving them that name, I decided when I wrote the book to just say what trim we're sewing down. I'm also thinking about turning this, which was last successful week of Fabrically Speaking Live, into a cup. Cozy. What do you guys think? And I can give you guys this as a project to sew for summer, since we're on the summer series. It is 2:11. A little bit slow here today on the live, but that's okay. If you're new to my channel, be sure to subscribe and like if you like this video. So I have it just pinned, but isn't that going to be cute? And this is my favorite thing. I have my Starbucks cups, and then I don't throw them away. I use them. And so it's going to be really nice to be able to just not let anyone know what I am drinking and what cup that is. So inside of the book, it's broken down by chapters, and we have the satin edge, pearls and piping, and sequins and ribbon. Basically, this is a recipe book for sewing and quilting, utilizing the Creative Feet. And so this is sewing pearls, and this is sewing 2mm pearls and beads. And that is actually couching, because we're sewing trim down onto fabric. And then you move through, and now we're at 4mm beads, and this too is couching. You can see here, this is a rhinestone that has the clasps around it, and that you sew upside down, and then you flip it over, and then voila, you have your trim sewn on. This is satin ribbon with pearls and rhinestones sewn on, and lace with beads sewn down, and that's couching as well, because we're sewing something down onto fabric. You can also couch upside down. This is corded pin tucks, where we use the pearls and piping foot and we sew upside down. So as you can see, this goes on and on, more and more methods or techniques or trims, types of trims that we can use. I almost lost my drink. And this is a MCT drink, Dr. Gundry. I love it. It's really good. So we'll set this aside. The Creative Feet Technical Guide and Workbook has all of the recipes, the boring part, the needle to use, the stitch length, stitch width, stitch pattern, needle thread, bobbin thread, all the stuff you need to know. And then we have the Creative Feet Techniques video, which you see on the front of my table here, also available in a USB flash drive so that you can put it into your computer and watch it from any of your devices if you stick it in the cloud. This is a product called Soutache braid. If you're familiar with Soutache braid, go ahead and give me an indication in the chat. And I'm going to show you it up close so you can see. I think this will be better. This is a sparkly one, but basically what it is it has like two train tracks, and you're supposed to sew down the middle of that, which is done, and this product is used a lot in high fashion. And it is a nightmare unless you have my Sequins and Ribbon foot and the 1/8 inch accessory guide. And I'm going to go ahead and start showing you a little bit of the Sequins and Ribbon foot first. Should I do that, or should I start with the pearls and piping foot? Sequins and Ribbon is the most couchy of the creative feet. This is another type of trim that you can sew down with it, and this is basically an upholstery braid that you can purchase to put on couch cushions, and you can also use this for belts, anything that you may want, and you can also embellish this by taking the pearls and piping foot. I think I'll start with that because it's cool. So we can take any type of bead, rhinestone, chain, cord, and apply it to the top of this. Let's see here. Each of the creative feet come packaged like you see in these little packages here with a reclosable container, so that after you're done using it, if you put everything back in it, when you go to use it again, you will know where it is, because you are good at cleaning up your space and taking the time to, whoops, sorry about that. I hit the wrong button. I need to rearrange these buttons. So here is the adapters, and they just attach onto the foot like that. And we have 4 different styles of adapters accommodating all of the different sewing machines. You have a Bernina machine, you'll use a Bernina adapter in addition to what's in the package. Another item that we have for the Sequins and Ribbon foot are the accessory guides. And the accessory guides are basically little earrings or additional size guides for the Sequins and Ribbon foot. I just dropped the foot. Do I have one here? Yeah. The Sequins and Ribbon foot comes with a 1/4 inch guide. That means you can sew 1/4 inch with trims. So if you had a larger or a narrower trim, is it cool in North Dakota, Wendy? Or is it as hot as it is here? Insert the trim right into the tube. And now you can see that the ribbon itself is locked into position. It can't slide out from underneath the needle, and it is patented. So every sewing machine company that made a look-alike, they do not have the same shape. This foot is holding the ribbon down so that when the needles exit, the trim will stay beneath the sewing machine needle. So you don't have to worry about, if you've ever tried sewing ribbon down before and the needle went down and then it came out and the ribbon lifted up with the needle, you won't have to worry about that happening with our Sequins and Ribbon foot. Initially, I designed this for a fashion designer who was designing garments the year that sequins came out on a string. So I'll show you also how we can sew them down. Set this beauty aside. I thought I'd play on some quilting fabric that I've already quilted to kind of show you how you can also do some couching on quilting items and then turn them into bags like this little makeup bag here. So nothing goes to waste. You can practice your free motion quilting using the octi hoops. And you can see the stitching on here. And this is what I take to shows. And by the way, I have some exciting news. I am attending a show in Scottsdale at the end of August. And if you go to quiltcraftsew.com, you'll find out information, or go to the events page at creativefeet.com to learn more so that you can come and see me live and in person, sit around my table and watch and learn about all of the different things that I do at a show. If you are not one of the people that can attend the shows, I'm going to put a link in the description below the video for you to watch a 6.5-hour video that I produced with the Creative Feet. Yes, that's how much these three feet do. So much that even in 6.5 hours of sewing nonstop on a video, I still didn't show everything that the Creative Feet can do. So I have my ribbon inserted in, and I'm starting to get really hot in here because I turn off the air conditioner when I film. It's not going to take long before it's hot. Your 92 is, so we're hotter than you, but that's pretty hot for North Dakota, isn't it? Or did you say south? Yeah, you're nowhere. Took off my shoes, so now I have the trim inserted into there, and I'm going to choose a stitch that I want to use. And the stitch that I am using is one of my favorite for this, is a shell tuck stitch. You can use whatever decorative stitches you want. As I mentioned before, this is just my favorite. What I do is I start to sew and see if the trim is lined up with the needle, and if it isn't, then I can move the trim over by turning the nut on the foot, and that adjusts the trim to the needle instead of the needle to the trim. Because on a zigzag stitch, you can't move your needle over, especially if you have the widest width of the zigzag stitch. I got so much stuff on my table. This is another project that I did using couching, sewing in circles, and to be honest with you, this was going to be today's lesson, but I couldn't find one of the elements that I use for this. So it'll be, I probably should do this as a recorded video anyway, but know that it's on my table as one of the next projects to film for you. And here we go. As I'm sewing, I am not holding my hands down, and I'm also not having to hold onto the trim. I'm able to just hold my fabric and steer in the direction that I want it to go. But generally, if you try to sew ribbon down, your ribbon will bend. It'll flip around like this instead of curving. With the sequins and ribbon foot, I'm able to turn, and the trim automatically goes where it's supposed to. Isn't that neat? So that's one of my stitches. If I want to learn another stitch, I can go ahead and select another one. This is a actual couching stitch. This is the way it's programmed into the machine. So we'll just give it a try. So if you had fabric, you can sew rows and rows of trim with the different stitches, and then right next to it with the ink pen, the stitch pattern, the stitch width, and the stitch length, and create a sewing machine Bible or sewing machine reference for all of your decorative stitches in your sewing machine. If you have a quilted fabric, it's sturdy, so you shouldn't have any problems with puckering or anything like that. Set this aside. I don't care for the way this stitch pattern is looking because it's so skinny and the ribbon is wider. I got more room, so I may as well fill it up. And to do that, I'm increasing the width of the stitch. That's the beeping that you're hearing. And this can go all the way to a 7mm wide width. So this is what I would write down on the fabric. I would write 7mm wide. I would write couching stitch, whatever stitch number it is in your machine. And then you end up, and you can see how I hold the fabric up rather than holding it down. So if you're familiar with this type of position, then it's going to take a little adjustment for you to relax and let the sewing machine do the beading. My stitch wasn't balanced on the ribbon like it is. I would then, as before, adjust the nut on the foot until the ribbon was centered with the needle. So that's another stitch. Let's see what else we got. Feather stitch is a very popular stitch, and this is how it comes out. Once again, it is not encompassing the entire width of the ribbon, so I'm going to go ahead and widen it, and I'm lengthening it as well, because I'd like to see more of the ribbon. And what you're seeing me do is I'm sewing a unbendable trim in a circle. I'd love to hear your replies or your comments in the comments about how hard it is to sew ribbon without puckering the fabric or without the fabric getting all bunched up, let alone sew it in a circle. So what you're actually about to witness, because I have such a close shot here, you can see that I have been sewing around in a circle. Getting a perfect circle like this is another process. This is more of a free movement design for sewing your trims down on top of anything you may want to sew it onto. So that's some ribbon. Next, I'm going to show you how we sew yarn on. And this is one of my favorite yarns to use because it is really soft. But you can hit the knitting store and grab any yarn that's there. All right. So this yarn has got to go through a guide and be held in place so that I can spin around and steer it in any direction. And with the sequins and ribbon foot, we can actually write out happy holidays or poetry with yarn. And as before, when I was talking about the sequins and ribbon foot has a 1/4 inch guide, and then we have the accessory guides. The accessory guides make it so that you can switch out to different size guides for the different size trims from 1/16 inch to 3/8 inch. And these just are locked inside. And each have instructions as well in these little booklets. So if you're going to sew 1/4 inch trim, it's inside of the foot the way it comes, and then when you want to do 1/8 inch, there's instructions on how to switch out the guides and how to set up the foot for each particular technique that you're going to use. There's another thing that this foot does that you may not think is couching, but it kind of is, because when you sew elastic, you are actually sewing something down onto something else. And it is usually very difficult to sew elastic with the sequins and ribbon foot, it is super easy. I'm going to take the foot off and switch out the guide so that you can see. For this sewing machine, I have the ability to just snap the foot on. I didn't need a guide. The next challenge is to try to figure out which guide to use. For the different size trim. We have the 3 different options right here. The 3/8 inch guide and the 1/4 inch, as I mentioned before, the 1/4 inch guide is the one that comes with the foot. It's attached to it because the majority of your trims are 1/4 inch wide. So you're most likely to find more 1/4 inch wide trims than other sizes because sewing machines are limited to how wide their needle swing is or how far apart a twin needle can be for the sewing machine. So I'm going to go ahead now and determine which guide or size opening this yarn should go into. If you're looking at it, you might think to use the 1/4 inch trim or guide, but we want to actually look at the smallest guide and then determine which one of these openings it should go into. But you don't want to look at it. You want to take the yarn between your fingers and squish and roll the trim. And when you're doing that, you can think about how you feel standing in front of the mirror. You may see your body the size it is, and this is how I'm feeling. I'm not suggesting you feel this way. And then but in my mind, I'm still that skinny girl from way back when. So when I take and roll my finger, I'm feeling the size rather than looking at the size. And this is actually able to go through the smallest of the 2 openings on the 1/8 inch accessory guide. But getting it into that hole is a challenge. Take some thread, and I have this strand that's connected to the fabric, a tail I did not cut. So I just have a piece of thread and lay that right over, and then bring the 2 ends of the threads together. I feel like I might have messed up on my settings on this live. Take the 2 ends and you insert it into that hole. Take and pull it through. That's tight going through, but we have 2 layers. Now you can see how it glides through easily. So I'm going to switch out. By just turning the nut until the guide falls off the foot. This is a little speed up method. And you can see it just can drop right out of your hand, and there's the nut in the guide. So you don't have to worry if you drop it that your nut is going to go rolling away. And the other reason that the nut stays in there is so that when the sewing machine is feeding the fabric and those feed dogs are banging on the bottom of the fabric and hitting the foot, that the nut doesn't start to turn, causing the trim to move from beneath the needle. So now I simply take the nut out of that guide and then drop it into this next size, and then insert that into there and begin screwing that back together. You can also spin this around, and you can also take and push and roll it on to like your blue jeans or a handle on a on a hammer works really good too, so that you don't have to use your fingers to tighten it down. As my assemblers taught me, I walked into the assembly room when we were on the Home Shopping Network and selling thousands of feet in a few minutes on their show, and I had spent hours screwing these feet together prior to that. And I walked into the assembly room and one of my girls just went like that, and I went, "Oh my God, what did you do?" And she thought she was in trouble, but I was so thrilled to see how fast she did that. It's amazing. So that tells you that the creative feet are made in the United States. I have a really nice blue thread on the machine right now, so you won't be able to see the stitch while I sew the yarn on, because the thread is matching. Now, getting the yarn to be secured on the end of the fabric, or on the end of the yarn to be secured, I have a little trick for this, especially if you got to start in the middle of something. You could stitch over it with a 3-step zigzag repeatedly, and then cut your needle thread and bobbin thread. And you can also pull the needle thread to the back side and tie it off. But the yarn itself is what we want to make sure is held down and not going to lift up. So I am going to use the couching stitch, which, let's see if I can find it on here, is this stitch right here. And this is the Baby Locks version of it. But you can also use a 3-step zigzag where it just goes zig, 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 zag, 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 and that will be adequate as well. Oops. I hit the edge of my screen and it turned off the screen, which means I need to calibrate my screen again. So sorry about that. If it has happened to you, now you know it happens to me. I'm debating on using a different stitch as well. I use the 3-step zigzag. You'll know what I normally use. So we'll go ahead and do that. And I'm simply going to stitch a few stitches in place by selecting a really short stitch length. You could also lower your feed dogs for just a minute and then raise them back up. After you've done that, then let's take the end and bring it to the front. We're going to go ahead and stitch again. Now I'm increasing my length of my stitch. Hi, Pacola. So that is enough to secure if it's actually beneath where I'm stitching. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit more, making sure, and then go ahead and cut that tail. I can clean that up after. There we go. So this is a 3-step zigzag stitch. And this yarn is furry. So what I do when I use this type of yarn is I try to pull the yarn back out, and you see how it's really hard to get that to go out. So I'm going to switch to a regular zigzag stitch where it just goes stitch on one side and stitch on the other, and see how that works. Making sure that I do in fact get my needle to go on the side and then on that side, so that this cord that is in the middle gets attached to the fabric. I don't want to go really wide on the stitch because then you'll see this stitch swinging out to the sides. And we really want to just think that that yarn is magically on top of the fabric. So it's better to adjust the guide so that you know your needle is swinging, in fact, left and right. And now, because it's a regular zigzag stitch, I can make the stitch length much larger or longer. This is it at a 3.0, and it's not moving at all. Why isn't it moving? If this ever happens to you, it is likely that the eyelash yarn is got itself coming around and you've actually sewed a loop onto it. Go. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take this all the way to 4.0. Is there something else that's stuck? Yes, you can see what's going on. This is what's going on. Eyelash yarn is a little tricky. So how am I going to make that not happen as much? Can pull out on the yarn a little bit ahead. It's very static even up here. So we have not had any rain in a few days. So that, if that ever happens to you, now you know how. And now we can go ahead and pull, and you can see that the yarn is coming out easier from a zigzag stitch. That's what you see right here. It's really soft and quite impressive, I think. Of course, that's a matter of opinion. This was a pillow that I made when I went to a modern quilt show because I wanted to have a more modern look rather than a traditional look. What do you guys think? Did I succeed? And this incorporates a variety of different techniques. So we've got our yarn. I've done the sequin, or I've done the ribbon, stitched the ribbon, couched the ribbon. I'm going to go ahead and do a little soutache braid. You can also sew yarn, regular yarn, down using a straight stitch and sew right through it. And that's a really good way to do it on a quilt, because then you have a straight stitch on the back side of your quilt and a straight stitch on the top. And then it just looks like the yarn was somehow magically placed down onto the fabric. In this case, this is a larger than average or thicker than average soutache braid. And I'm going to place it into the 1/8 inch guide on the foot. Am I? I don't know. This is, we'll see if it works. Hi, Brenda. What happened? I was like, did I mess up my live? Because this is the least active the chat has ever been. I'm hoping that there isn't something terrible in the news that made people not show up. Of course, I only gave you guys a 15-minute lead. I'm going to try to be better at giving you guys more notice. Just know that if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, you will receive a notification, even if I don't have time to send out a pre-notification. Because when I'm preparing for doing one of these, I'm preparing to actually do it. I don't have a team of people to do the computer work to get you guys the information you need. So just subscribe to my channel and set your notifications to on so you know. Loud and clear this week. Yes, last week was Interesting. It took an hour. I had to restart the computer, and that's what finally fixed it. So I am looking at this and I can't get it to go through that. I don't think it will, even if I use thread to feed that through. And I'm thinking that the pearls and piping foot might be the best foot for this particular soutache braid. Know that I have almost always been able to insert it into the 1/8 inch opening on the sequins and ribbon foot. And that's one of the neat things about having all of the creative feet, is that if one doesn't do the couching that you need, or if one's design doesn't make it so you can completely let go of your trim and just sew it down, one of the other feet will likely suffice. So I'm going to use a straight stitch and center the needle into the actual trim in between the two little railroad tracks that are on here. And the foot itself has this little washer that slides left and right on the bar. I don't know which side to put it on. It depends on the sewing machine. So the first thing I do is put it on, and then I lower the presser foot and go to my center needle position. And if my center needle position is not center, which it is not, I'm going to take that foot off. I could move the needle over. That's one fix for this. The other fix, if you have a featherweight sewing machine or any sewing machine that is just a straight stitch only, you're limited as to where your needle is going to be. That's your needle position. So if you want to get your needle over to the side, you're pretty much out of luck with every other foot except for the creative feet. So on the creative feet, pearls and piping foot, I'm going to switch this to the other side, and that's going to move my trim over. All right, I got my needle too low. Where are you at, you guys? And how hot is it today, as this is July 9th? Is it July 9th? Of 2025, and it is a warm day here in northern Arizona. Now, because this trim is so rigid, it isn't ideal for putting on top of a quilt. But you could use it for other methods or other techniques. I did need to use my needle position capability as well. What if you have a zigzag stitch sewing machine and you don't have a needle position, or you have only 3 needle positions? You can actually take double needles and wear protective eyewear and cut off either the left or the right needle, depending on which needle position you need. And you'll find these double needles at creativefeet.com. They'll be in the description on the video, and after this is no longer live, I'll add the shop to links for you as well. So if you look at a double needle, it has this, it's the 10th, thank you. 93, yeah. So this plastic part right here moves the needles off to the side of center. This represents center. So you can take wire cutters and snip off one of the needles. That will give you a right needle position that you didn't have. Each of the double needles are different spacing or different width. I have 2 of the same right here. Here we go. This is one I think only one sewing machine in the sewing industry can actually use. 8.0 millimeter means the machine had to have a 9 millimeter wide zigzag. But you can see how far away that needle is from the center. So the reason I'm telling you to wear protective eyewear is because these needles are tempered steel, and when you snip it off, it will go flying. And that doesn't sound very good, does it? If you cut all the way up to the plastic, this whole assembly will fall to pieces. So you want to come down at least 1/4 inch. When the needle goes down into the fabric, it doesn't go all the way up to that part. Watching right here, you'll see how far down the needle goes into the machine before it comes back up. And it is that 1/4 inch, a little bit more than 1/4 inch distance. I think I just heard thunder, which would thrill me because it's been hot. I would show you cutting these, but I don't want to waste a needle. And I think you get the idea. A whole bunch of different spacings of double needles, which means if you don't have more than 1 or more than 3 needle positions on your machine, purchasing the double needles, 1 for the left, 1 for the right, will give you a more advanced sewing machine without having to go buy a new sewing machine. And I am adjusting my needle position a little bit in addition to the foot's adjustable nature. You're having humidity. This is how I'm holding the fabric, holding up the fabric so it doesn't get stuck on all the stuff on my surface, and also lifting up the fabric in the front. So this is just me being an assistant to the sewing machine. I don't have to touch the trim. I do have the trim over my arm just so that it doesn't get caught on the scissors and other things inside of my little catch-all that I have. So it's a real easy steering of one of the most challenging trims that you can sew. And I got lots of tails because this is a quilt that I use at shows to demonstrate the octi-hoops. And when you want to steer with this, you just go left and right, whatever direction you want. It guides the trim for you. And that is the patented shape of the tunnel of the pearls and piping frame. Makes the trim have to behave or follow the shape of the guide on the foot. If you were going to end with this, you'll want to use clear nail polish to secure it before you cut it, if you're not going to actually put it inside of a seam. But you definitely cannot count on that not unraveling. So it's best to use this type of, anytime you have a fabric that, or a trim that's really woven, is to have it end up being in a seam. It's really, I like it. I think it's edgy. Is that a thing people say anymore? You can also sew more than 1 row of those side by side using this and create a really cool cosplay look. Now, since I have the pearls and piping put on, and I have some ribbon, and I have some pearls, I'm going to show you how I can make my own beaded ribbon as well, which costs a lot. But if you buy the ribbon and then you buy the pearls, both being really inexpensive, and then you sew them together, you can save a lot of money. And people use this to decorate wedding cakes as well. And they charge, I think it's $4.95 a yard to have it beaded, or it's 15 cents a yard to make it yourself. It's getting hot in here. Whew. You could use invisible thread or match your thread to the ribbon I'm going to just keep this blue thread on to save time. And then you just slide the pearl right in. And just as the soutache braid was held captive by the foot, so will these pearls once they get stitched on. Using just a standard zigzag stitch. And then making sure that the little washer on the foot is in the proper position for your sewing machine, which you determine before you begin sewing so you don't break needles. Whew, I feel like someone turned on the sauna here. So what you're not seeing is that I am using my left finger to guide the ribbon and my right hand is off the fabric. So my right hand was just on my lap, and but I generally, with ribbon, because it's slippery and so skinny, is I will help it. This is one of the few times you'll see me put my hand behind the presser foot and sew. However, I also have my ribbon upside down. You want to make sure that the right side of the ribbon is facing up. Otherwise, and you may not know this, but the wrong side of fabric curls up to the wrong side of the fabric. I show that to help you guys know how to determine which is right and which is wrong on a batik fabric. Well, on ribbon, it will do the same thing. If you have the ribbon with the wrong side facing up and sew the pearls on, you'll end up with the ribbon trying to wrap itself around the pearls. So I did a little bit wrong, and now I'm going to just take and flip this over and get over that to that. This is me just cheating. I could have just cut it and started again. Get you out of the way. See how the pearls, I just want the pearls out of the way. Get out of the way. The foot guides them. There. And then you can just have the pearls lay over your hand while you guide the ribbon. And we're trying to see where the ribbon needs to sit on the sewing machine. I have different guidelines on the machine. You can also use washi tape and position it so you know exactly where to position your ribbon, and keep your eye focused there. Ignore the beads. The beads have no choice but to go right on top of the ribbon. Now there are a lot of copies of my pearls and piping foot, but this one I designed for a person who couldn't open her fingers. So she couldn't stick her finger out to touch the pearls or to hold the ribbon. So all other feet in the industry will not allow you to just have your trim, your beads just lay off to the side like that, allowing you to watch the ribbon. And another really cool thing about making beaded ribbon is you're making another trim. You could sew the ribbon down and then sew the beads on the ribbon. That's a two-step process. This too is a two-step process, except for it's a lot easier to get the beads on the ribbon using this method first and then stitch it down. So I'll go ahead and take this, cut this, and make it or stitch it down as well. So now we're taking beaded ribbon and couching with beaded ribbon. So you can see the vagueness of the name couching. It's pretty much always been listed as sewing yarn down, but there's so many different trims, and you can even make fabric and take fabric and cut it in strips and stitch around it with different color threads and make your own trim and then couch that down. Couching is one of the most fun of the techniques that creative feet do. But you need to think about, what are you sewing down? So a pearl, if you were to put a pearl on top of fabric, it's gonna hurt if you kneel on that. If this was a quilt, All right. I'm just now seeing your edgy comment. Oh, I'm like, what's wrong with my ribbon? And that's because I had it upside down at the beginning. So excuse my deliberate mistake. I'm getting past that, and I'll show you the close-up. Now, if you didn't want to see any stitching, you can use invisible thread. I know that I'm really not happy to tell you that we're having issues getting invisible thread in the nylon. And I'm actually been looking for winders to become our own winder. But the company that I buy the thread from said they have limited quantities. So now I'm concerned about the source. It's out of my hands, out of my control. I'm doing everything I can to keep you guys connected to the nylon invisible thread. In the meantime, Invisifill by Wonderfill is a super thin thread. It's 100 weight. It is so small that you may not even be able to see the thread. And it kind of is a good substitute for the invisible thread at this time. Why didn't that switch? There we go. So this is green, and you can kind of see it. But once I drop it, it kind of disappears. It's really a lot harder to see. So if you wanted this to disappear, you'd use a thread that kind of blends in with all of these colors. The one that blends in the most, like a light blue or a gray color. This one's great for quilting, though. This is the... gosh, what color is this? I got my labels lost. Can't remember what color this is. I will remember, or I'll look it up, and then I'll put the most blendable of all of the colors for a wide variety of different mid-tones that you will incorporate into a quilt is and it's not sap green, it's khaki, the khaki color. So it really does blend nicely on, believe that's what I've got right here. Well, there's a lot of stuff on this. I thought that camera was in better focus than it is. I moved the set a little bit. So I used it for the quilting, and see how fun. If you really want to do a good job, you can do some different designs, and then you combine it with your quilt, with your couching of different elements. And this is basically a wall hanging, and I intended to leave the ends hanging down to create a more interesting fiber art project. This is just the fabric that I bought that I love, but you could take and use our fabric paints and inks that you find at creativefeet.com and spray them onto the fabric. In fact, I have a video inside of my Claire Rowley Creative Notions on how to make your own fabric, which is another fun project to do. Okay, so I'm going to continue sewing this beaded ribbon down. And there is hours and hours and hours of sewing that could be done using couching. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with that. And you can also use a couching technique to bind the quilt. Would you like me to show you that? Of course you would. So I'm gonna, I will participate. Since I said it, it's my fault. There's a desire to hold on and guide. And for those of you who knew Nancy Zeman, when I first came out with the foot, she was holding it, and I said, don't hold the ribbon, or don't hold the beads. And she goes, I'm not. And she had it like wrapped in her pinky like that. I miss my mentors, Nancy Zeman, Clotilda. They were the two that embraced me when I first released the feet. I was only 23. Now I'm over 60, you guys. Where did all those years go? Did any of you get to meet Clotilda or Nancy Zeman in person? Nancy was very subdued. Clotilda was wild. So all of that sewing the ribbon, beaded ribbon down without risk of breaking my needle, with my arms resting on the table and lifting the quilt up. What did I say I was going to do? Oh, I'll show you how you can also use couching to bind a quilt like this. So if you're wanting to do some fiber art, create your own quilts, but you don't want to use traditional binding, perhaps because as you sewed, you disfigured your fabric so much that it's no longer square. Have you guys ever seen a quilt that had a weird shape? And generally that's caused by the person over handling their fabric. And as their hands are down pushing, they're actually causing the fabric to spread across the bias, and then the needle is stitching it and locking it in place. So then you're forced to think of different ways of binding other than my fabulous binding technique that you'll find at my YouTube channel. You can just search within my channel binding and find it. You'll actually find a few. Looking for my good cutting scissors, which are not where they belong. Uh-oh. Well, we'll see how well we'll see how well my junky scissors work. I can't blame anyone but me for losing my scissors. So I'm basically just gonna cut this weird. And we have the top, bottom, and batting on this. This will make a good what? Do any of you know what I use batting and fabrics for? One of you knows. And you can sew it together, and you could actually just tie a rubber band around that too. And you can use this as a crutch or as a hump jumper to get over bumps. There we go. So that is not a very good shape. It's curvy. And this is the situation that people get themselves into when they handle their fabric, push down and force the fabric to move in a particular way. Then the fabric gets stretched out and locked in that position. Mad 14 Carat. What is your name? I'm going to take some blue. That was loud. It's a darker blue thread that I have, so it'll work for what I'm going to show you now. Slide that beneath. You can use this more than one way. What you're noticing, or what you may not notice yet, is that rat tail cording is the thickness of your batting and 2 layers of fabric. So this is going to sit off the edge of the quilted fabric. And I'm going to go ahead and do a blanket stitch or a shell tuck stitch. And the reason I've chosen a shell tuck stitch is because it stitches straight stitch here and goes over. So it's going to grab and wrap that in. We'll see how I always go wider as well on the zigzag stitch for the edge to account for this being in there and being off the edge. Once again, I'm not holding the cord, just steering the quilt. Keeping my eye focused on the fabric, making sure that it lines up the right way so that my needle stays on the edge of the quilt. I'm also doing this without pushing down. I'm lifting up the fabric rather than pushing down. With my one finger though, I am kind of doing a little bit of a squishy to keep that together. Hi, Monica. You like gold colors? So the posture is generally done with an elbow pillow underneath my elbow, and then so you don't wear out your body. And now I'm going to show you what it looks like a little bit up close. And this is what it looks like. I had my head too far out and I didn't do a good job trying to keep my head out of the camera, which makes me sit in a weird way and not see as well. There you go. Now, to really make people wonder what's going on and how you did it, use a zigzag stitch. I'm having button issues. My brain is having trouble remembering which button to push. I've almost ended the show because I'm shortening my stitch length, and the word there, you don't need to know. So there I'm doing a zigzag stitch and you can still see the cord. Now I'm going to shorten the stitch length. Now I was thinking tightening the stitch length, and then I was hitting the button with tight on the button. Focusing on the left swing of the needle, ignoring the cord. I'm looking here, not over here, not paying attention to this. This is none of my business. What I have to do is make sure my left swing is hitting on the quilt. And I'm not pushing through because I want my thread to cover up completely the rat tail cording, which means that it doesn't matter what color the cording is. If you have a thread that you like, then you get a solid look. I'm going to go a little bit shorter and show you something really neat, or a little bit longer on the length to expose a little bit of it. So this takes couching to a whole nother, not level, but direction, a different direction. And that is covering up both sides. So that's a quick, instant binding. I feel like one of you went, oh, cool. All right, so now I'm putting a straight stitch on. And I'm going to center my needle with this, with the trim. It's going to sound a little loud. Oh, first I could do that. All right, I'm going to do a left needle position first because I want to show you how you can actually, come on, brain, can actually let go completely, and it will sew a straight stitch right next to that, which will give it a very professional look. and keeping that stitch length or the distance, the needle position, the stitching line will be exactly the same distance all the way along, as long as we don't touch it. And now I'm going to go ahead and do what I said I was going to do before, and that is sit it right on top and center my needle. And sewing a straight stitch right through it, and you'll hear it. Maybe it's a little loud. Now I'm switching to one of the fancy straight stitches that does a couple stitches front and back, and then it jumps, and then it does a couple stitches back and forth. And I'm lengthening the length. I'm going to move my needle over. This is why you want needle position capability on a sewing machine. And what it does is it kind of separates and makes it look like it's crocheted on there. What have I not done? Well, I haven't done a lot. Would you like to see how we can sew rickrack? I sewed some pearls. I could also sew pearls right on the edge of the binding that I just did. But this will be a never-ending episode if I don't keep myself from going too far. And I didn't get lunch today. So we're an hour and 15 minutes in. I try to keep the show an hour long. I frequently fail and go too long. The same foot that I just used will also make it so you can sew all sizes of piping, by the way, and all kinds of piping. So this is a braided piping. And even though the foot, those little pearls, it also sews the big piping. And it can sew piping bigger than my finger. That camera is so out of focus. Would you like me to put a little pearl on the edge of that? That's one of the reasons to do that other stitch, is so that it doesn't come out in the wash. And you can go really close as well. Using that heavier straight stitch, I can move it over as well and go right next to it. So there's no way the fabric will unravel. So you can't even see it, but I did that same stitch that I did on this, which is forward and reverse straight stitch, right along the edge of that. This is very, very secure. To keep it all together even more, you can put pearls on or different other types of cording. And I'm gonna go ahead and do some pink pearls. This foot is so much fun. All the feet are fun, but this is a favorite among educators. They really do love the pearls and piping foot's versatility. Using a zigzag stitch and a wider width. And what I'm doing is making sure that this lines up so that the left swing of the needle is going to hit the fabric. Not touching or trying to guide the pearls at all. So my right hand is here. You can see the pearls are right there. And now I'm going to shorten that stitch a little bit more to show you the variation. You could also use metallic thread. One color in the needle, another color in the bottom that complements this, and people will wonder how this was created because it looks like it had to have been done by a special sewing machine. It can't just be your regular old zigzag stitch machine. Basically, if you have a zigzag stitch machine and you get the creative feet, you now have 88 different things you can do with your sewing machine just by adding the feet to your collection. Oh, I took it off didn't let you watch it. Sorry about that. Me and my buttons today. See that? Isn't that beautiful? That is a very, very tight look, and I'm taking a screenshot. Okay. I can do something else. What would you like me to do? This is about couching. I should keep it on point. Always know where you're putting your trim. See, this is right. I get to where I should stop, and I don't want to because it's so much fun. So for those of you who are that just came in, know that you can rewind this video. It is a live video, and information will be in the description below the video once it's done doing its thing, which does take a little bit of time when we go live. And be sure to go ahead and, if you like this video, hit that like button. And if you've yet to subscribe to my channel, I sure hope you'll do so today. And you can also join my school, createwithclairerowley.com. You'll find the links for these in the description below the video. Thanks for joining me today for this very hot, sweltering July 10th of 2025. And if you join the newsletter as well at creativefeet.com, you'll be notified of special sales and discounts that we have periodically. And I am thinking about doing a little newsletter today after this. So if you join now, you won't miss out. Thanks, you guys. And I'm trying to figure out how to end the show gracefully. So with that, what you've been watching is Fabrically Speaking Live. I air every Thursday at 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, unless I'm not available or unless the universe has something else to say about it, which happened last Thursday when an electrical storm kind of made everything not work. And it took an hour for me to get things to go again. I ended up filming that video live, or not live, recorded it. So go ahead and check out my YouTube channel where you'll see last week's video, and you were a part of this week's video. Thank you guys so much. See you next week or in the school. Bye.